When it comes to the early 2000s, there's nothing that screams nostalgia quite like a device that flips open. Let's get into it. Today we're taking a look at the RG34XX from Anbernic. It is a GBA SP style retro handheld, very similar to last year's 35XX SP and the Miyoo flip. The differences between this and the 35XX SP is that this has a 3:2 aspect ratio, just like the GBA, which means it actually has a slightly smaller 3.4-inch screen. It also has the addition of these dual thumbsticks at the bottom. But that's where the differences end. The specs are pretty much the same. We have a volume rocker, a 3.5mm headphone jack, dual SD card slots, power and reset buttons here on the left side, an HDMI out on top, and a combination DC and OTG port, USB-C style, right here on top. Now, if you've watched any other review on an Anbernic XX device, they've all had the same specs since December of 2023, with the H700 chip and a gig of RAM, with one exception. This is no different. So performance here is going to be exactly the same as you've seen on 10 other devices that have come out from them in the last year and a half. So this really isn't going to be a very long review. Personally, I have one problem with this device, and everything else I think is absolutely excellent. And it's the same problem I've had with it since I originally saw the reveal trailer, and that's that I just do not like the huge bezel across the top and the bottom. And I know that there's plenty of people who love the fact that this is a 3:2 display, and if that's you, that's totally fine with me. But personally, I would have preferred that they just give me a 4:3 display that was 3.5 inches. Because the only system that I'm really going to play 3:2 here is the GBA. Every other system is going to be smaller than a 3.4-inch screen, and it really bothers me aesthetically that we have these huge bezels on the top and bottom. It also really bothers me that they're not symmetrical. There's more space up on top than there is down here, and I'm a little OCD when it comes to symmetry, so that alone kind of makes it a device that I just don't enjoy looking at, and that makes it really hard to be a device I enjoy playing. However, there's really nothing else about this device that I can complain about. I want to really point out the hinge and just how great the hinge is on this device. I have here the Miyoo Flip V2, which did improve the hinge over the V1, but I want you to hear this hinge. Every time you open it, you get this nice clicky noise, and then it clicks there again at the end. There's no quiet way to open or close this device. It is literally impossible to do. Not to mention, every time I open and close it, I think, is this the last time it will open and close? Now, so far, 6 months in, it's held up just fine. But listen to the 34XX SP. Practically silent. And it feels so smooth, and it is so satisfying to open and close. It's almost like a fidget toy. It feels really solid, and I just think this thing's never gonna break. It's always gonna work the way that it's supposed to. Now, that may not be true. Most things eventually break over time, but that's the way it feels when you're using it, like it's a device that's going to last. And so I give it huge props for that. Now, just to compare here with the Flip, it is virtually the same size. It is a hair taller and just a hair wider, but other than that, these are pretty much exactly the same. The only external difference is you get an extra USB-C port on the Miyoo Flip there on the bottom. But as you can see, everything else pretty much lines up. In fact, if you had these side by side and the hinges weren't designed differently, which you can see there that they are, you might think that they ordered the shell from the exact same factory and all the parts. I mean, it's so close to identical that it's almost kind of funny. Of course, this does come preloaded with that classic Anbernic stock OS, as well as a pretty common 3300 milliamp hour battery that gives you about 4 to 6 hours of battery life. And if you get it with a card, it will come preloaded with some games. It will not, however, come with any Nintendo games on it, and that includes the GBA, even though this is a GBA clone. but you can add your own simply by putting the SD card in a computer and copy and pasting your own ROMs into the appropriate game folder. So I added a few of my favorites here. I'm playing a game and looking at the display, especially a GBA game, and the colors are just super sharp. Everything looks gorgeous. I think everything's really easy to read. As much as I don't like the bezels, GBA games just look absolutely excellent on this display. Now, as far as the controls go, I will say that the buttons are pretty clicky. They're definitely not silent. The shoulder buttons are particularly loud. In fact, you can hear those right there. Pretty loud. The face buttons aren't quite as bad, but the D-pad is also very clicky, which is weird because the Miyoo Flip actually has very quiet buttons. Even these aren't anywhere near as loud, and neither are the face buttons or the D-pad, but opening and closing it is so much louder. So it's almost like, you know, I wish we could take elements from both devices and combine them into one device. That would be perfect. Let's take a listen to the speaker real quick so you can hear that. There's nothing particularly great about the sound, but there's nothing particularly not great about the sound either. It's just kind of average. It gets loud enough in most environments. One thing I do want to say about the joysticks underneath is that the tops of them have a really nice rubber textured grip that I think does a great job of helping keep your thumb from slipping off. Some of the system shortcuts built in here are you can hold down the menu button and hit Y and it will show you the FPS. Hit Y again to toggle that off. You can hold that down and hit X and it will pause your ROM wherever you are. And if you hold that down and push start, it will exit out back to the main menu. Now their solution, of course, to help you forget that this is a 3x2 screen for that 4x3 content is to have an overlay already set up for you here, as you can see here on Dreamcast. And of course, this here is mimicking an old CRT television with the edges of a Dreamcast there on the left and right sides. And this does come in 4 colorways: the yellow, the gray, the black, and this is the indigo. And Anbernic sells it with 3 different card sizes: 64, 128, and 256 gig cards. Again, this is a 3.4-inch IPS display that's 720 by 480. It's run by the H700 quad-core ARM A53 processor. It has a dual-core G31 GPU. And I said earlier that these come with 1 gig of RAM, and this is one of the exceptions to that rule because it actually does come with 2 gigs of RAM. It has built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. It runs on a Linux 64-bit system. It does have a video player and ebook reader, a 3300 milliamp hour battery for up to 6 hours of battery life, and it supports over 30 different emulators. And when it comes to comparing the size of these screens together, for some people this is going to seem silly and almost negligible, but you can see here the difference between the 3.4 3x2 screen and a normal 4x3 3.5-inch screen. There's quite a big difference in the amount of display that you see. And 1/10 of an inch doesn't sound like it would make that much of a difference, but the aspect ratio, that's what really makes it such a big difference. And I think you can really see that here. And I keep comparing it to the Miyoo Flip because it does have the joysticks, and man, do they not look so similar? I mean, they're almost identical in every way. The 35XX SP doesn't have thumbsticks, and I personally really prefer to have a thumbstick for my N64, my Dreamcast, those 3D games. Some people don't want that. Some people just want to play 2D games with the D-pad, and that's totally fine. And some people are okay even playing some 3D games with the D-pad, and that's fine too. It all comes down to your personal preference. But I'm really torn when it comes to these two systems in particular. There's so many similarities, but so many differences. The Miyoo Flip seems to be a risk because the Hinge may or may not last, but you get a bigger screen and much quieter buttons. I digress. Let's move on to checking the temperature. I've been playing this 34XX SP for about an hour now, and so we're going to do a little temperature check on it while we have something a little more substantial like the Dreamcast running. Right here in the center, we're going to find it to be about 100 degrees, 101 degrees, 102 degrees. And on the back, it's also going to be right at 102. And right across here and here are really the hottest parts of the device. The sides where my hands were are going to be actually much cooler. Down here at the bottom, much cooler. Up here on the screen, much cooler. The back of the screen. So it's really just right there. Not too hot at all, really. So I don't consider this a device that will become uncomfortable to hold or overheat on you. I just want to go back to the bezels for a second. The more I look at it, the more I think they really missed an opportunity here to leave the joysticks off here completely and then shave down the height of this screen, keep that 3x2. It probably could have even come to here, and then they could have made a smaller device without joysticks and that had, you know, symmetrical bezels. And personally, I think I would have liked the look of that much better, and then it would have been much more in line with the 35XX SP. But for whatever reason, they decided to go with this time, and that about wraps up my thoughts about the 34XX SP. Let me know what you think in the comments below, or which device you would prefer. Thanks for liking, sharing, subscribing, all that jazz. Stay kind and encouraging out there, and I'll catch you on the flippity flip.